Okay, so today we're going to go back to the Hachaim, and this is a shir which actually is a repeat of a shir that I learned with this young man from the Kollel here in Boca Raton, who's really an excellent reader, and he's moving right along on this. And we're going to repeat it because I learned it on Shabbos, and it wasn't shy to record it at that time. Let me see what I got to do to get this working. There we go, a little bit better. So this is the famous Chaim with the Pirush Rahut, a running commentary by the Hachaim. This is this Rabbi Gamliel Rabinowitz. He says, we're on number Tes Zion here, and let's see, here's Tes Zion. He's Boyer Sha'al Yedecha Betishas Or Chozer Bereshimo Noded Or Revi. So he's counting 3 lights, and he says it's a striking of the light, and it causes a 4th light to come out. How's this? Let's read, we'll read down below, and we'll just keep going on the Pirush Rahut. Let me see if I can get this out here a little bit better without destroying my... Okay, here we go. It says, "V'hi v'b'cha b'or ha'shlishi hazer shehu din pogea b'or ha'breshimo ha'nishach shehu rachma v'haz makim and v'bachim zecha b'zeh." Then they strike each other. So we have to go over which are which. Shehem shnecha hafchim. They're 2 opposites. V'zecha v'or yasher v'rachmim. One is straight light, which is the light of love and kindness. V'zecha v'or chozer v'din, and that's a returning light, l'or din. V'zecha v'chefetz v'zeh chefetz la'alos l'makora. One of them, his old desire, is to go upward, to do tshuva, and come back to its root. V'hu or ha'reshimo, that's the light of the reshimo, which is left over from the or yashar, which has gone back up. Shehafal pi she'ein decha b'olam mamash, that even though it's really not going up, im kozech hefsa, but what it wants, v'cheshko, hu l'hidabeg v'lekaba b'meno, is to cling to and to be able to receive from it. V'or ha'shlishi chefetz, the 3rd one, that is chefetz l'yere, that wants to go down. This is the returning light that is pouring off of the backsides of the spheres up above, and we'll get into more of the detail on that, which is as the spheros are going back to the Pada'ak, there's a light keeps flowing out of the Pada'ak, and this is called returning light. Then she'ein is shav and beteva, but the natures of these are one wants to go up, wants to go down. Their differences are very strong. Therefore they strike each other, as is known. He called the kolos of betishus ora zecha bezecha because why do they strike each other? Because they're not made the same, they're different. So as they turn to up above from the ma'atzel, this is called the or ha'chozer derek achrech spheres, it goes along the back sides of these spheres. And when it does that, it strikes the or of reshimo, which is inside these particles or these bits of the Yoser or Chozer Derek Achrech spheres, that is the bits of the lights of the Or Yasher that came down and remained in the spheros. These are lights that the clear, pure light that was originally there left in its place, when they went back to the Ma'atzel. So since it comes from the straight light that comes at the beginning, so therefore it's called by the aspect of Rachamim. So that's the nature of it. But the light that's coming down now, as the lights are moving, as the more refined lights are moving up, the light from the matzo keeps coming down anyway. Nikra bechinas din, that's returning light. So they strike each other. So since their natures are opposites, V'sivus is nagdusam who, and the reason why they're what is right, his nagdim, they're against each other. Kiki or reshimo who rachamim v'cheshko v'chefsach the lamala b'shorsho wants to go up. V'edacha or hachoyze, but there, as we talk about the returning light, who did v'chesed le'red lamata, and what it wants to do is go down. V'chein kul olam, that's always the way it is. Shekol betisha v'chakosh and the beina oris, that all of this betisha, all of this striking, which is made between the lights, who rak behi yosef bebechinas chafkios, is when only they're opposites. V'zecha din v'zeh rachamim. V'zecha betisha hi bebechinas yichud v'zivul. But you have to understand, this is an interesting idea. It says that opposites, which are like male and female, even though they wed and they reproduce, but you see what happens here is that their natures are very different. As a result of that, they are able to reproduce. That's what he says. This is the concept of copulation. So then the sparks come out, they struck each other, and they produce sparks. But it's less, the sparks are going to be less than the reshimo. And this is the revelation of the fourth light. Now let's see, I was supposed to read this little blurb at the top, so I will. It says, Yisboyer, Shadalad mini orheim, Keneged Arbega Bechinas Tanta. So there's 4 different types of light. They correspond to Tamen, Nekudos, Tagim, and Osios. Let's see how it works. Now they struck each other, and now their spark came out. So these sparks, they come and they fall down into the place of the spheres, and they clothe themselves, they enter into the Oros Ha'avim of Agasim Shenishar B'Makoma, which did not go up and go back to the Pad Ak. Let me see if I have a little trouble with my how we're laying this out. So B'Makoma Al Yedera became Nishlam a Kli, and this is the way that the Kli becomes completed. Now we're going back, when the lights start striking each other. The sparks, they come out from the lowest possible level. Because of the fact that the strong light is striking it. Because everything switches around like this. In what way? So what's happening now? Let's try to understand what man is. Man is Mayim Nukvin. That's what it stands for. And let's go back to hear what he said again. So this is the light of the reshimo. What it wants to do is go up. This is called the concept of female waters, who feel their lack, they're not where they are, they're missing. There's chaser, they're lacking. So they need one to go back, omed b'makomo, but it's still in the same position that it was. It's a yearning, that's the Mayim Nukvin, which is the Bechina of Mayim Nukvin, Shechicha Nuk, which is female. So now the light that's coming back now, continuing to pour down as the spheros, that is, the more refined part of the spheres are going back to the Pada'ak. The light that's coming down, is Mad, that's the concept of Mad, which is called Mayim Duchrin, which is, it's like this, that if you pray, you're going from the bottom to the top, your position where you're praying, or when you're learning, the same thing. He says that's called Mayim Nukvin. But the answer is the blessing that you get as a result of that is called Mayim Duchrin. That's male waters. Shuhu Hadacher, which is the male. So now you have these 2 lights, a male light and a female light. So when they strike, there's a light that's produced by them, which is similar to the Mayim Duchrin. Why? Because this is the Mayim Duchrin, which is the turning light, is the strongest part. So we have a phrase that the son is called after his father. So since the sparks are already in the aspect of something which is born out, so therefore, in other words, it's a second generation. It's not as strong as the generation before it. Ki min ha'or yasher, because from the straight light, which came down originally, v'or chozer pashut shehu gerua. So between the original light, the light that's coming back down again, and these sparks, or whatever they are, they're going to be something left. They're a second generation. But even the reshimo, which is left over from the or yasher, or Hazak, since the region originally came from the strongest of the light, Shabbat B'techila B'sod or Yashiv Rachman, is originally Rachman. So therefore, by its nature, it's going to be higher. Therefore, Hu Ma'ula Yoser, this is a higher level, Shahu Rak Roshan Ba'alma, even though that it's just an impression. Ve'eno Atzmos or Mamash, and it's not really the essence of the light itself. V'nitzutzas Chalalu, so then it's struck. And the result of that, the Netzutot that come out of it, Sof called Sof, Heim B'Bechinas Din. The Netzutot is going to be Din. V'or Zera B'Chalevshel, the Netzutot, so the light that's now coming from these Netzutos, Heim B'Bechinas or Revia, this is a fourth type of light, Sheyesh Ba'olam Ha'akudim, which we'll find in the Olam Ha'akudim. So he says, number Yud Zayin. So he says, so now Netzutos that come down, Hayored Shehudin. So Vuhu Garua or reshimo. So now a fourth light comes out, which is going to be less than the light of the reshimo. Or Acher Revia, and this is that fourth light we talked about. So he says like this: Kasher or reshimo v'or hachozer makim avachim zebezeh. So we see from this that the between them the sparks come out. So let's translate it. What happens? They fall down into the place of the spheros that are there. And they clothe themselves inside of the thicker light, paragasim, that remained in their places. And in this way the kli becomes completed. As the lights strike each other. And Netzutos yotzim so the Netzutos come from the lowest possible level. Now, I'm trying to understand what he means by this. And the reason why is because this reshimo was struck by this powerful light which is coming out of the Pada'ak, which is going downwards. So now everything switches around. The or reshimo. Then we read this already, is the katz of man, which is a nok. So therefore, since the male is dominated, it's the strongest, because the light's going to come out, it's going to be more like the mad, that's the male light. But that's the main part here. So we think like we've read this already. Since they're considered to be gruad mikola oros. So let's see, I think I read that twice, so let's not waste any time here. Let's go over to number Yud Ches. Mini or, so now you have four different kinds of light. Or, Vehim Sod Arba Bebechinas Tantach on his boy La'el. Shohayu Kulu Kululim Be'elucha Akudim, because all of them are incorporated into these Akudim, Vezecha Bepratim, and this is their specifics. Or Harishon Tamim. The four Harishon, that's original direct light that came down, is called Tamim. For Hachaim, then a light of the backside of that, Hu Nukudos, that's a light that comes back down, it's an Or Chozer. Ki Nukudos, Din Olam, and it's going to be a din. V'or reshimo hu tagim, so the reshimo that's left over is considered to be the tagim. V'or Netzutos, and it follows because so the sparks that fall down as a result of the smashing of these two together, and Nekudas, who they're the letters. From the letters we make Kalim. Which is really made out of the striking of Nizgar, which we mentioned previously. He says, everything that we spread up above. We come out and we learn this. That She'olam HaKudim Yesh Arba Mini Oros. Shuhu Shlosha Oros in his Karam is Nitzkar La'el. There are three lights that we mentioned above. The Ravor of Or Ravi, so the fourth light, who are Netzutos. V'arbacha Oros Cholado, these four lights, Haim, Sod, Arba Bechinas, Tamim, Nekudas, Tagin, and Osios. And his Galam Derek Apad Ak, which now are revealed through the mouth of Ak, Hanikwa Olam Akudim. Bekach whose Sedach is Galus, this is how they are revealed. Bechinas Tamim is Galabi Yitzias or Rishon Minapah Shahu Bechinas or Yasha. So now it's explaining the four lights. Let me get this back up here, I'm sorry. So the Nekudos have to do with the coming back, the light of this Or Choser, the Meir Derek Achrech Sephiras Olos. So as the spheres are going up, it falls down on their backsides and delivers itself to the sphere below. So this is why the Nekudos are saying here, as we're going to learn, because the Chudas are always din. The Bechinas HaTagim is Galim Be'or reshimo. So the concept of the Tagim is where we have the revelation of the Or HaReshimo Shenishna Be'esh Allah B'Chazara HaOras HaZachim at the time when the more refined lights, which says that this is the beginning of the process over there. He says that when that originally came, he said was left over. Now let me see. The Makoram, the Sharshams are left over there. So the letters themselves are revealed by the sparks themselves. On the Asem because of Betishos or Reshimo or Choser Shehim Bebechinas the Kudavatagi. Mehem Naasar Kalim Shehim Bebechinas Osios. So for them comes the Kalim, which is the aspect of Osios. Okay, he says like this: V'nira lanias daiti, sheshimati b'morazilcho, ki kavar koya bechinas kalim ba'olam hakudim. They were already. So this is a side idea. They were already kalim in olam hakudim. Rak she'elach netzutos and his karan is arvachim b'malchim, and the kalim, the sparks mix in with them. V'hu kedugmas harapach netzutos, and this is similar to the 288 netzutos that we're going to learn about later. As we learned about as Hashem. So let me just see this over here. So he says, we had this little blurb at the top, I didn't read it. He says, that in its essence, he says, Nishavo Kavar Kalim B'Hakudim, there already been Kalim in Hakudim. And we could also look at the Or V is really the Neshama, the Kli, that already exists. So that's a way of looking at it. Let's look at the light print down below and see how I can make it work out. And then here we go. He says, Matzatzi Kasev, I found this written. Vafal Pisha the El Biarnu. She'ain ba'olam b'chakudim rak b'chinas kli echad, and in the olam hakudim there's only one concept of one kli. B'kan nirik yos the kol or kli echad, and it seems like this, that in every kli there's already a light. I am b'drush mati v'lo. There's a drush later on in the 8th Chaim, which is I think the 8th shar of the 8th Chaim. It's called mati v'lo mati. It got there, it didn't get there. It's like a process of going back into the Pad Ak in detail. Raya lezecha ki harecha nisbar lamala When the light came back and starts pouring off of the backside, was already at a kli there, which is the aspect of the thicker light of Shabo. Marhu mevi merabah harizal mahu inin the Netzutot. So that if it's already there and it was created as a result of leaving the light, the more refined light departs from and goes up from the more physical light. The physical light is the kli. So, and we have a whole story about how the lights come back not in order and how they fit into the kli. So this is what he wants to say. There already then we see kelim. Because the more refined light, all of the peh da'ak, they went back into the peh da'ak. Hufrad or ha'av, so already had a separation for the thick light and the more refined light. As the oras ha'avim, and it leaves those still in the same place. The thick light is still there, v'chagasim, and the heavy light, because that's the foundation of the kli. Im calls that besides that, yesh gam tzork be'eloch netzutot, it has to be that this netzutot should not mechakos or reshimo or hachaim, because of the striking of these two lights. Since the netzutot are what completes the kli, it gives it a certain life force. That's why he said previously that it's like a neshama, his Chaim, and so they could keep it alive. As a shivra hakelin in the kudim. Later on, we're going to get to a shar, which is called shar rapach, which a rapach is the number 288, and that has to do with the number of sparks that are able to keep alive or maintain the kalim that are broken. Like a fish is bar, but Makoma as explained later on in his place of Harai, kalim terin shenoldah and Netzutot. So when we say there were kalim there before the Netzutot came out. Mamashin is bar lamal, that is what we explained previously. Shah oras hazachim nis alav anisha b'makoma l'matach of oras ha'avim bavad. So that all that's left behind is the thick light. U'mechem na'asam ha'kli. But there's a question here. The halacha bi'ardal la'el shesivas yosin nekroim akudim. Why are they called the kudim? Now that's a different idea. He said mishum shekala oros akudim kudim. They were bound together. Because sure, another word for bounding together. Yachdav. So you have these different lights that are being bound together. Kulim ke'echad b'zot kli echad. All of them together inside of one kli. That's what he said before. So how are we getting the 10 kalim over here? Ve'lu kan mashba shekol or chaniach or b'makomo. We know this already. So therefore, that is the basis of making a kli for the tzvira. The nimseim came shagam ba'olam hakudim. Yeshasara kalim b'chulokim. There are already in there that there are 10 differentiated kalim. V'idach b'kam ba'otzes in the Chaim. Harav eina kosev ala be'inya l'liyas ha'oras ha'akudim the peh da'ak. So he talks about these kalim, all in the concept of the lights which are more refined going back into the peh da'ak. Below kosev al yitzias ha'oras b'pam shniyah b'peh da'ak. It doesn't talk about them coming back down from the mouth of Ak again. Zecha b'dava is bar barucha be'etz Chaim b'shar hanikra mati v'lamati. So that whole idea of there's a second generation of light, more light comes out again, more than one, that's contained in another shar, which is not here, but he's telling you that it's out there. That's in the Eitz Chaim, not in the OTZROT. The Sham Tiritz Rabbi Chaim Vital al Kushazel. So Rabbi Chaim Vital answers this question. It says Shekli Hakudim who commit kli sheyesh bo eser shanasos. There are like say 10 differentiations in the kli. Both in she'or hakeser omed berosh hakli, that the light of the keser stands at the head of the kli hazeh, because sfira choisach omedet tachtov, and all the rest of them were down below. In other words, there's an order. It has a higher level of light and a lower level of light. Ad sharamalchus choisach betachtis kli chanizker, and the malchus is the bottom of the kli. So you look in the kli, there's one kli. The kli has 10 different parts. Amnam kala eses spheres chalalu, hoya omdas yachtav b'kli echad daika. They were standing together only in one kli. That's the part to understand it and know. V'lo b'chasara kalim. It's not 10 kalim. It's one kli with 10 lights, different kinds of lights. So what we said, that every sphere leaves a thicker light. It's not to try to tell you that this is a separate kli. So there's a light that remains into that one kli, in this one place. So there's a light that appears there. So it's lights that appear inside of this kli. So now we're going to talk about how we know that this malchus is the same idea as the splaklaria, the lis la magrama klum, that has a splaklaria is like a lens, or it's like a mirror that has no light of its own. It's a reflector. Why is it also called the splaklaria that doesn't shine? So let's go back and try to explain what's being said here. We know that the light of malchus, lo hishira reshimo, she doesn't have any reshimo left in it. So all of its aspects went up and left. It went up. That's the reason why it's called a lens which doesn't have anything of its own. Because everything left, and not even an impression is left over there. But Yisod, only the reshimo that was left over in Yisod. Levad Meir Gam Came Alecho. Now, what does he mean by that? And let's see the idea. Vata Maskil around the Farish Inya the Betisha the Pratas. But the Hidach of Bevar Ha'echnis Chavach HaKliach of the Netzutot the Hakios the Kli the spheres of Malchus. So how is it? This first thing he wants to talk about is how is it you get light into Malchus to keep Malchus around? It doesn't leave over reshimo in its place, because there's nothing down below it that to shine onto it. So in order to shine onto it, this light of this reshimo, there's nothing to shine onto. But there's a problem here. How you actually make the finish of this kli shalom malchus, because that's the way that the kli is finished. They have to have this striking, and there's no reshimo left over in malchus. Also goes up together with the light of its reshimo. It doesn't leave anything down below. It has no light by itself, its own light. So then how do you make a kli out of this? Tiritz says, and the answer on this, he's going to explain this as we go along. Called reshimo meir l'kli shelo, so every reshimo shines into its own kli atzmo. V'gam l'kli shetachtov, and also for the kli that's down below it. V'im came sark l'vayr hakli shel malchus, so therefore we have to explain the kli of malchus. Nehi nami she'ein lo kli tachtov, since we know that there's no kli below it. Avachavachelech b'shachal l'kli shelo. Me'ein tikach. So how does he get a kli? If you don't have a reshimo, you can't make a finished kli. This here also. She'ein the malchus or the reshimo ma'atzma. It has no light of a reshimo for itself. Of a yeshlo or shemeir bas spheres yisod, but yisod is shining at malchus. Behind the Sha'or B'Reshimo Shenisha B'Makom Yisod, that the light of the reshimo that remains in the place of the Yisod, Meir Gamalach is also shining onto her. So now it isn't only shining in its own place, but the light goes down to Malchus, which has no light. Vod Yesh Tam Acher Al Nizkav, and there's another reason he wants to say. V'hu Masha Kasamda, the El, what I wrote up above. Ki Asher Chavachazach Havaoros L'Redis, as the lights go back down, Yisod back down. Nishara Keser Devukum B'Ma'atzav V'Dochav the clouds, so the Keser doesn't come back down. The Nimsa Ki HaChochma Chazrach B'Makom B'Keser, so what happens is the Chochma goes into the place of Keser. V'Chav Malchus B'Malchus Yisod, and Malchus, the original Malchus, is now in the place of Yisod. So maybe you could think like this is shining into its own Kli. The Neshach HaKli Shal Malchus Bilti or Klal, but the Malchus itself has no light. Its own light is in Yisod. It's a light that doesn't shine. So we had the Drush Ashar Kadamos over there, and he gives a place to look. Now we can understand why she called a lens, like a light, like a spotlight kind of thing, that doesn't have any light in it. Mishum Sha'af b'his pashtus ha'shniya shel ha'oros, so also in the second time that the lowers are coming down. Shuka shecha chazach oros hakudim that says prepared the ark, because he says as the kudim come out of the Peh Da'ak a second time, that is after the lights are going back to the Peh Da'ak, Oz lo choye yored shum or b'makom b'malchus, then no light came back into the place of Malchus. Because there were 10 different kelim. The lights that come out the second time, there are only 10 lights. There are only 9 lights. So he says, he's explaining it out exactly how it is that Malchus winds up with nothing. Because after they went into the mouth of Ak, Nishar or HaKeser David B'Batzilo. So he's explaining again. The Keser never comes out again. The Fichach or HaKeser Lo Yatzib his Pashtu, so it doesn't go out in a straight way. It doesn't go out. Hashniya. Ela Yatzib Rakma or HaChochma, but only what comes out now is the or HaChochma, the Malchus. So then only nine spheros come out, 9 lights come out. Both in Sha'atach Niknas B'Kelim Rak Tisha Orish, there's only 9 lights that come out now. Sha'or HaChochma Yored the Kelim of Keser, so the Yored of Chachma goes down to the Kelim of Keser. V'or HaBinach the Kli HaChochma goes into the Kli of Chachma. V'chein Kulam Ad Sha'or HaMalchus Yored B'Kli HaYisod. So you get the or of Malchus is in the Yisod. V'meida Nimsa Shekol HaMalchus Nisha L'lo or Ap his Pashtus Ashniya, so the still, even the second his Pashtus, it doesn't have light. The Vichel B'Malchus Nikras Baklaria D'lo Nahara, that's the reason why it's called by this name. Now let me just get an idea where we went. We learned this on Shabbos, and I'm repeating it. So here we have one more page. We're on our last page, and let's see what else he tells us. Now we said that everything goes back towards the Peh Da'ak. Malchus goes back to the Yisod. It goes back over the backside. The light this is returning light, the light of Din. It's going to El, as we mentioned. Now you have the light of Malchus going up, and you have the light coming off the backside of Yisod. It's going to strike this light as it's in transition. So off of the back of this place of the strike, and they fall into this empty kli of Malchus. So it's interesting. He said, "Call us Pirush Olam Lamalach Olam Atza Lenichu B'Shiva B'Mekom Lamat." Vein Gemar Hakeden Asa Ala Ayedech B'Shima says the reshimo that participates in the creation process. the bavatesh be'or hachozer, and it strikes the or hachozer. But Netzutos noflim ayidecha bezecha benigma kli, so the Netzutos fall, and through this the kli becomes completed. But Malchus doesn't leave anything behind. All in the reshimo goes up above into the reshimo with the reshimo, so the reshimo is gone too. The light and the reshimo are gone. So coming off of the backside of the light that's of Yesod, it doesn't just strike the reshimo, but it actually strikes all of the light of Malchus that's going up. So it doesn't strike only the reshimo. This is the reason why, because they went together. So therefore it's striking all the light of Malchus. So it's as if so with the striking of these two together, it produces these sparks. So now we have an answer to how Malchus becomes completed. Now it says, as the Yesod went up, it left the reshimo behind. Now that's a different issue. When it struck this place, it struck that reshimo and the Netzutos, and the Netzutos fell out of that. Then what happens is that reshimo was able to shine on the kli from a distance. But it doesn't come into the so the tagim. This is the secret of tagim. We have to remember back to our tanta again. The motion is boy of the command Pirush and the kudim ayin sham. We're going to see that later. All of this is only in Malchus. But it doesn't leave a reshimo by for itself. But that's not the case by Yesod. When the finer parts of Yesod rise up, they leave behind the reshimo. All the rest of spheres do this, because the reshimo shines into the sphere that's below it. What it wants to do is go up. We talked about that before. So then it strikes the light that's going down, which is called the or chozer. So then you see that the light of the reshimo so it surrounds then, and it's shining on top of the kalim. Dugmas hatagim ha'omdim al gabe ha'osius u'meirim le'oros shehem ha'kelim b'rachok. I need to read this again one time. So there's reshimo left in Yesod that says chafetz la'alos. What it wants to do is go up. And of course it's going to run into the light that's going the other direction. And from their striking comes out these netzutzim. And this makes the complete kli. Then what happens is the or of the reshimo. That's where it's a little bit hard for me to understand what he meant. It's now surrounding and it's on top of the kalim. And it's similar to the tagim ha'omdim al gabe ha'osios meirim le'osios shehem ha'kelim b'rachok. It's like tagim, which are a light, that's shining onto the letters, which is a lesser light, which is down below it. Kamo kain or reshimo machaya es kli merachok. So therefore, the reshimo also is bringing light into this kli from a distance. Since the reshimo is not inside of the kli, but on top of it instead. V'chein also called a spheres chutz min keser. So this is the way all the spheres did, with the exception of keser. He hanich reshimo l'tzorach hachachma, because the keser leaves behind the reshimo for the purpose of the hachachma. Of a little asa bechinas kli, but it doesn't make a kli. Fisha b'shlomo sharcha spheres b'aliyasa lamala al yedecha b'kaz. A reshimo b'masha lamala mechem, by the striking the reshimos, striking the ore that's coming down onto them. Hoyin asa hakli, that's how the kli was made. Ach hakeser ein misha yakab b'aliyasa, so there's nothing to strike it. V'chein nigmach b'dayim a kli shalo, so therefore the kli of keser is still not finished. All spheres hoya mashairas reshimo b'makomo. Every sphere left a reshimo behind in its place. Aliyasam, and when they're going back to the Pada'ak, hoya or choizer shala sphera chavyanis, so the returning light that came from the upper sphera. Pogea or reshimo, repeating this again, shala sphera tachtona chemeno. V'hamivachim zebazeh, and they struck each other. And Motzian Netzutot, and they bring out Netzutot. So he says, and from the power of the Netzutot, you make the complete kli. Amam or hakeser hagam shehanich reshimo b'makom, the light of keser, even though it left of reshimo, because that's the idea of the reshimo. Im kol zechabuku lo kibul or choser misphera al yada b'mena, but even so, it's not getting anything from the sphere up above it because it's the top. Became she'ain sphera ma'al hod lahoyer, but there's no sphere up there. Ka el yemenu hu hapeh da'ak shuhu ma'atzilo. That's what made it come out. Ein bo rak or yasher b'chadish ein rachamim. So all the keser becomes then is or rachamim. And that's an important part to know about keser in general. V'od yesh tam acher, there's another reason. Kevin shahapeh da'ak pona tamid al keser, since the mouth of ak is always looking at keser. Let me see, he said the peh da'ak pona tamid al keser is always turned towards keser. But keser pona alav, and the keser is looking at it. V'meilad nimsa shachakeser kibul rak or panim shu rachamim. So therefore, since it's looking at the pada'ak, because it's up at the very top, right? This is where everything came from, and pada'ak is looking at it. So therefore, all of this, it has nothing but absorbing goodness. So therefore, it doesn't get any or choser at all. There's no striking over here. Bein or rachmi and or den. So therefore, along the way, lo naasa gemar hakli b'makom makesser. Ki gemar hakli nishlam rak ad yedech alcohol, because this only is completed through the alcohol. B'harei ki keser haniach reshimo l'docho b'kli. So he says, like keser, it leaves behind the reshimo, but it doesn't leave behind a kli. V'shar shemonach l'sfiras anichu reshimo v'lo kli. V'chamalchus anichu kli v'locho reshimo, malchus leaves a kli, no reshimo. Nimshah shekal spheres anichu hein kli v'chein reshimo, so they leave behind either one, both of these. Chutz ma'keser, with the exception of keser, and also the exception of malchus. Keser hanich rach or reshimo. It reads only the concept of reshimo because it's shining downwards, but it doesn't. There's nothing up above it. Lo kibul or choizer malamala lamala memena. There's no returning light. So therefore, it's really all chesed, all rachmanas. So it doesn't have a complete kli. The malchus. Heyer ba or choser v'chad yisod, so the or choser that's coming off of the yisod comes into malchus. Aki lo haniach reshimo b'makoma, but it doesn't leave anything. But malchus doesn't leave a reshimo. Ad kan is bor b'divrei harav ma'anaasa be'es aliyas ha'oret b'chazocha d'peda'ak. And his bar shekal the kalim explain that all the kalim, the hakudim nigmaru, are all completed. Chutz bin the keser she'ein lo b'dayim kli, which doesn't have a kli. So now let's find out what's going to happen on to these when the lights come back into the kelim, what happens? Gavar Meleches Kli, and also the details of how the Kli is ultimately made. And let me see if I skipped something. I skipped something. Let me see if I got this right. No, and we're over here. V'gumar Meleches Kli, the finishing of the Kli. We're going to get to that too. Hachaim, the Kli of Kesser. That's where it was. That's all we're going to do, and that's where we're at right now. So this is Baruch Fleischman, and repeating this shir in the OTZROT Chaim.